It's really not every day that someone might come across an anime that makes a seriously concerted effort to teach things to its audience. Yet here we are, now ending the summer season of 2018 with the dramatic finale of Cells at Work. And it's also not every day that I personally get to experience the thrill of watching something I have seen in its original format transferred to the anime medium. It was an interesting experience, and here I am now to tell you what this experience has wrought. Welcome, people of Earth and elsewhere, to the Spam channel, where Crackers will now attempt to review Cells at Work. Between the two new anime I was really looking forward to this summer, Cells at Work was not the one I expected to take the spotlight. Its premise is a simple series, made by geeks, for geeks, a show about a human body, and a close-up look at the microscopic lives of the cells who make it function. Our main cast consists of some basic cells everyone who has taken a biology class knows about, like red and white blood cells and platelets, and a host of others that the average person probably can't pronounce, but here I go anyway trying. Macrophage, eosinophil, basophil, monocyte, mast cell, dendritic cell, and several kinds of lymphocytes, to name a few. Each one has a very specific job to do, and the show is more than happy to take several minutes of any given episode's time to explain exactly what each and every one is, while also taking as much time to define the processes by which they do them. It's almost like how someone might read a biology textbook where certain words are printed in bold and then given definitions on the inside margins fully explaining the meanings of words like phagocytosis, activation, and glucose so that they can be understood in context. As these cells go from one day to the next doing their jobs, each episode focuses mainly on various bacteria and viruses that afflict the body, how they function, and how the body works against them. The term coined Monster of the Week is fairly appropriate, considering many of the episodes follow a directionally challenged erythrocyte who is constantly running into the same member of the immune cell army, a stoic neutrophil, whose job is to get rid of such infections, including but not limited to pneumococcus, staphylococcus, and streptococcus. The show does have the odd episode dealing with regular bodily functions, like the development and differentiation of certain cells, and discussing the circulatory system in depth. Sounds pretty boring, doesn't it? Unless you know you're a weirdo who's into that kind of geeky biology stuff. But all these things are only part of what draws some people to the series. The thing about the show that really catches the audience is not necessarily the subject matter, but rather the creative nature and unique illustrations of it. Cells at Work is far from the first animated series, movie, or such to personify the cells of the human body, or teach about them for that matter. Once Upon a Time in Life, Osmosis Jones, The Magic School Bus, and these old Schoolhouse Rock music videos, just from what I know personally off the top of my head, have all done similar things before. But perhaps Cells at Work is unique in the depth and detail it puts into both these aspects, and how it depicts its subjects. This one body is a world all by itself, and everything affecting it happens on a scale appropriate to that. For example, a scrape is something very small when looking at it from a person's outside perspective, but the cells on the inside have a very serious problem on their hands. Bleeding drags blood cells out of their world, effectively killing them, and the open wound, no matter how small, allows bacteria to swarm in and potentially infect the body if they are allowed to spread. But, in the face of this, the tiny platelets still do their jobs fearlessly, and the white blood cells fight off the antigens because that's what they do. It's their job, and they are working cells. There are several testaments from medical students and doctors alike who look at this show and point out the smallest details from character designs, cell and antigen alike, to the locations within the body, and are surprised by the painstaking attention to them. Of course, it's a for the most part kind of situation, as for perfect accuracy, one might as well be watching a series of documentaries on the functions of cells in the human body rather than an anime. The nature of some of the characters and their functions are compromised to better fit the world and explain certain things to the audience. Since all the cells are human in shape, they are kept well around the same size, where in reality the average neutrophil in the body is about twice the size of the standard erythrocyte, and macrophages, well, they have macro in their name, so as it implies they be very, very big, and bacteria are very, very tiny by comparison to all of them. And that's just one example where reality is ignored in favor of building a world for teaching. Another often mentioned by the people watching the show is the standard lifetimes for some of these cells. red blood cells live up to about 120 days at the most, and the platelets, these adorable little kids that they are represented by, only last for about a week at most. For consistency of character and likely ease of explanation and storytelling, and not wanting to emotionally traumatize the people watching the show, the cast remains the same from start to finish. There is an explanation floating around where the standard lifetime of a cell like a neutrophil is marked by how often they change their uniforms, and I can attest to the fact that there is a side panel in the manga that mentions uniform changing, but there is no indication that it happens as regularly as how long a neutrophil lives standardly. There's no direct correlation. I digress. Whether or not this happens to be a fact, the characters live much longer lives than the cells they represent in real life. So, this is just to enforce that the show is not 100% accurate to real-life biology. But once that reality has been reached, it becomes much easier to appreciate the parts of the show that are in line with their real-life counterparts. It's almost like a game to look painstakingly close at any given part of the show to see what else might be hiding in the background. This game can lead to some incorrect assumptions, but I have another video about that and won't mention it again here. Now, all of the things that I've said so far can be seen in the manga this show is based off of, so let's dive into the anime specifically and what makes it good or bad. First off, it has been brought to us by David Production, which is important to mention because that's how I got so many people to watch my first video concerning this manga's adaptation to an anime. The studio, who is now giving us JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5, Golden Wind, first decided to run a 13-episode anime about the adventures of blood cells just doing their jobs inside of a nameless body. The good news is, it was popular, again to my surprise and the surprise of many others. The translation from manga to anime is about as spot on as one could wish for, and coming from David Productions, this is no surprise. While each episode adapts one chapter of the manga at a time, some scenes are padded out a bit to make the adaptation stay smooth. The padding works well for the most part, but some of the shorter chapters being adapted tend to make for slower episodes as a result of trying to keep this chapter-to-episode standard consistent. As far as creative choices go, in this respect, the chapters are often adapted out of order, which can be a good thing, or a bad thing. It makes the episode order harder to predict if you've read the manga, so the mystery of what comes next is an exciting reveal, but there is a snag with the slight continuity that the show does retain. Since food poisoning is covered before allergies in the anime, instead of the other way around, we are privy to being told what phagocytic cells are before they take the time to explain what it is that it means that they perform phagocytosis. Time to look up the vocabulary words in the glossary of your textbook, students! Aside from that, nothing is left out, and the show manages to put the two most compelling arcs of the manga that were to be expected out of 13 episodes at the midpoint and finale respectively. Pacing is thankfully not an issue. When in motion, Cells at Work looks particularly great in the first half of its run, though it does begin to lose its flair in episode 7, which is a shame considering the stakes of the chapters being shown to the audience in that episode. Whether those stakes are what's distracting them from the lackluster bits of animation, they seem to be things that could be adjusted with what we call the Blu-ray treatment. In spite of the increasingly less impressive movements of the show, it never dips into looking absolutely terrible. The opening sequence is one of the most direct I've ever seen in a while, featuring a group of the main cast's voice actors singing about the roles their characters play. There is even this jarring incident in the second half of the show where the second verse of the song plays over a specific episode. I say jarring because the second verse is not bad, but the visuals for the opening sequence aren't changed at all, and it comes across as a bit confusing to the viewers. Luckily, it's back to how it was the very next episode. The ending sequence is a charming little tune set to an offbeat platelet metronome that could easily make its way onto a top 10 list of pick-me-up anime endings. The rest of the music that makes up the soundtrack overlaying the show sets tones all the better and is generally outstanding, from the peppy platelet song that oozes cuteness to the orchestral badassery that is the cancer theme. As a whole, there are a good number of aspects of Cells at Work that leave many an anime fan calling it enjoyable but nothing too special. After all, in the end, it is still a shonen anime. It's episodic and does follow a Monster of the Week formula. Aside from a couple of episodes involving traumatic events, death and dying of characters is few and far between. Those having been named or numbered in many cases are clearly exempt. Things like blood cells bleeding and destruction of apparent important membranes call the validity of the show as educational into question. Furthermore, the apparent developing relationship between an erythrocyte and a neutrophil demands a whole new slew of answers. Those things being said, it's hardly fair to call Cells at Work a standard shonen anime. From the pages of its manga to the frames of its animation, there is so much detail and exposition given to try its best to represent the very real human body as a world of its own, and the biological functions that it has as societies collectively working together to keep that world alive. It's a world both familiar to all of us and at the same time foreign as we look at it from a new microscopic angle. Each of the cells diligently doing their jobs is one of trillions who are individually organized and designed specifically to show us how they work. From the outfits they wear to the equipment they use and even the dangers they fight, it's a series made to explore and educate those who decide to take a closer look at it. While not outside of developing and growing throughout the series, the characters are explicitly shown to function within the bounds of what they represent as a cell. Now, it is a far cry from a replacement for an actual class on cellular biology, but as it is, there are a good many things one can in fact learn from it, and some of its depictions are actually really helpful ways to remember these kinds of materials. Not perfect, but it does its darndest, and the praise that the series gets is appropriate for the amount of effort and care that was clearly put into it. For something that is both blatantly throwing facts at its audience and also unapologetically anime, it may be more than reasonable to say that there's not a show out there that's quite like it. So, what is Cells at Work? Well, it's certainly not for everyone. There's not a show, book, manga, song, movie, or anime in existence that's for everyone. However, it is an anime that hits surprisingly hard outside of its target audience. That being younger viewers and those of us with predisposed interests in the subject matter. The characters are charming, the settings are colorful, and the stories it has to tell are steeped in facts some people find hard to believe. Though it bends some rules to fit its own creative nature, it doesn't stray too far from reality. To put it simply, Hataraku Saibo is a show about cells at work. Cells working hard, and cells doing their jobs. It is a show that just about has enough materials for a second season with a 6th volume of the manga on its way, eventually. Who knows if it's got the stuff to stand the test of time and go down in anime history as a classic, but for all the fun it's had in its seasonal run, I doubt that anybody who took the time to watch it is gonna forget about it anytime soon. If you haven't given it a solid try yet, I highly recommend checking out Cells at Work. Well, that's all for now, folks. Thank you ever so much for watching this video through to the end. And as always, you're welcome to share your opinions in the comments. Whether you like or dislike the show, agree or disagree with the review, I'd like to hear what you have to say. If you like this video, consider subscribing for future spam of similar nature. Suggestions for future videos and artistic endeavors are also always welcome. I'm done talking about cells for now, but if there's ever going to be a movie or a second season, you guys will know about it. Just like how you knew the first time. Keep an eye out for cancer in the thumbnail. Speaking of which, you can find the link to the finished picture in the description below, along with any other links I think I need to put down there, so check those out at your leisure. Once again, thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope to see you in the next video. Ciao! And with that, we move on to another JoJo season. Oh boy.